Unless they overwhelm an enemy right away, most Sith Lords will eventually lose in a lightsaber duel. Without peace, you can't keep your mind clear. Without peace, you forget technique. This bold quote given to us by Luke Skywalker provides a very telling perspective that he had concerning Jedi and Sith when it came to lightsaber combat. This is the quote from Luke that began the notion that Luke believed Sith were inherently worse at lightsaber combat. With all due respect to the Grand Master, we have decided to come against this quote today and analyze if Luke Skywalker himself was correct. Are the Jedi inherently better lightsaber duelists than the Sith? Greetings, curious acolytes of the Force, and welcome back to the archives yet again. In today's holocron, we wanted to take a critical examination at Luke's claim that the Jedi were, by nature, superior duelists. We know that Luke is quite masterful in lightsaber combat, and has much more experience in that arena than most. However, we also think that Master Skywalker's assessment may be somewhat biased, and in some cases, he could be outright wrong. We invite all of you to share your opinions down below as always, but now, let us begin. Luke writes this critique of Sith combat in the margins of the Darth Bane chapter in the Book of the Sith. In this specific chapter, Bane is talking specifically about the 7th lightsaber form, Juyo. He says that emotion, not peace, will lead to victory. While Bane goes on to explain what he means, Luke underlines that one line and makes his comment. I would also like to point out that all throughout Bane's chapter, Luke is very vocal about his disagreements with all of Bane's doctrine. We've already done a video talking about why Luke hated Bane so much, and this is just another one to pile on top of the many things that Luke despises about Darth Bane. Luke seems to not only hold contempt for Darth Bane, but all Sith of the rule of two. It's not something that one would expect from the boy who redeemed Anakin Skywalker. However, it's something that we see repeatedly. Luke knew his father was inside of that black armored prison, and therefore he had something to relate to. He does not appear to carry the same sentiment for any other Sith, especially Bane, though as seen evident by his rather venomous responses all throughout the Book of the Sith. It is possible that Luke secretly holds a fiery hatred for Sith because of what they did to his father and what they wrought on the galaxy. Luke's bias is understandable, not only because of his contempt for the Sith, but let's actually take a look at what his precedent was for believing that the Jedi were better duelists. Luke learned most of his lightsaber combat techniques, as well as his history of the Jedi Order from Ben Kenobi's series of journals, which Luke had found in Ben's hut following the events of The Empire Strikes Back. We get a detail on everything Luke found in the hut in the canon novel from the journals of Obi-Wan Kenobi. Obi-Wan writes to Luke detailing all of the events of the Clone Wars and what led to it all, of course, from his own perspective. The reason this is important is because let's remember just who Obi-Wan was. He was one of the most skilled lightsaber duelists of the entire Jedi Order, and as Mace Windu put it, the master of Form 3 Surisu. Obi-Wan would have been too humble to include the most important factoid in his accounts of events. So let's look at it from Luke's perspective of reading this at this time. Ben Kenobi is Luke's only point of reference for what a Jedi is, besides Yoda of course. However, Yoda's instruction was far more focused on the mysteries of the basics of the Force than lightsaber combat. It was Obi-Wan that gave Luke any indication of how a Jedi Knight conducted themselves in a lightsaber duel. We mentioned this because Luke is reading Obi-Wan's accounts of the Clone Wars and reading about how one of the finest lightsaber practitioners is triumphing over enemies left and right. Obi-Wan defeated Maul as a Padawan and again as a master, defeated Ventress several times, and went toe-to-toe with Count Dooku as a full-fledged Sith Lord, and of course is responsible for triumphing over and crippling the Chosen One who had freshly indulged in the dark side. Obi-Wan was an absolute beast in combat and one of the best. But of course, he would have never mentioned that. Besides these journals, Luke's only other reference for Jedi combat would be the accounts given of previous wars against the Sith Empire by the Jedi holocrons that he would find later. Now obviously these holocrons give a generalization of events and they do not go into great detail. The proud Jedi that wrote these aren't going to include everything, so naturally, Luke is going to be lulled into the assumption that the Jedi are better in combat, without knowing all of the finer details. All Luke sees are the victories of the Jedi Order collectively in the accounts of Obi-Wan Kenobi, a literal Jedi Council member. This is why we think that Luke's perspective is innocently biased, but now let's get into why we think it's outright false. As with anything pertaining to warriors of any kind, there is no better way to do things or a superior fighting form. It is always a case-by-case basis and will be different for everyone. There are Jedi such as Sindralik, Obi-Wan Kenobi, Yoda, Plo Koon, and Keo Sendarach, not to mention Mace Windu and Satele Shan, beyond, which are capable of taking out swaths of Sith acolytes and still have plenty of energy left to contend with a Sith Lord and then defeat them. However, to the same token, there are other Sith such as Malgus, Tula Kord, Sidious, Bane, Exar Kun, and Darth Mar, who were known for their incredible lightsaber skill. A couple of those mentioned, Tula Kord and Malgus specifically, have hundreds, even thousands of Jedi kills under their belt. Darth Mar was said to be so deadly with a lightsaber that he was more effective at defending a system from an enemy attack than a planetary shield. Darth Bane was so skilled with Sarisu, the all-defensive form, that he managed to create a barrier with his lightsaber and walk through a downpour of rain without so much as a drop landing on him. Even Sith that didn't like lightsabers, such as Darth Plagueis, was such a prime duelist that he won the acclaim of his master, despite Plagueis himself regarding lightsaber combat itself as a tedious matter and never engaging a Jedi in combat. Should I even mention two of the greatest Sith duelists in history in Lord Kasim and Count Dooku. Kasim was the Brotherhood of Darkness's Blade Master and the teacher of Bane. Even in Bane's prime, he couldn't defeat Kasim in a straightforward duel, and fell back on luring him into a trap with the Force. And we're not even done yet. Count Dooku may have been trained to fight as a Jedi, but just like Vader, Dooku switched it up a bit when he became a Sith. He switched to being far more aggressive in his Makashi style, implementing the dark side into his blade work. The way he moved his lightsaber was like a knitting needle weaving a tapestry of pain and death with which to cover his opponent. Despite using his inner rage, his technique was crisp and never faltered. Exar Kun, also a Jedi trained individual, but he too switched up his 9-man style to be far more aggressive, and he never really lost a single duel against any Jedi in his life. This is the same way that men like Kasim and Darth Mar fought. Luke claimed that without peace, one's technique would suffer. However, that may be true for an untrained fighter. The true Sith Lords of the past fought with a ferocity that allowed them to retain their technique within their storm of emotion. In fact, Luke has a big flaw in his argument here. The Sith actively taught against losing oneself in the storm of the dark side. When Kasim the Blade Master was training Bane and his other students, he instructed them to allow the fires of the dark side to flow through them like a storm, but not allow themselves to get swept up in it, lest they lose control and slip up on their technique. Kasim personally punished lapses in technique harshly, and even those Sith who outwardly showed their aggression in combat, such as Malgus and Sidious, they were still able to channel it in a way that achieved them near flawless victory. To Luke's credit, many of the Sith that he faced in his day were mostly those of the lost tribe of the Sith. The only time Luke would personally experience a true dark side adept at the blade would be when he fought Vader, and then the resurrected Darth Sidious. And although Luke would later face Exar Kun, it was only his spirit and not with the blade. All of these, though, you would rightly assume would be special cases. Knowing this information, it's clear that it isn't entirely Luke's fault that he has this conclusion about Sith combat, but hopefully we've provided a good enough defense here today on behalf of our Sith warrior brethren. Anyway, my friends, I do hope you enjoyed this video, but we definitely want to know if you agree with Luke or the ways of the Sith. And overall, who do you believe was the better lightsaber duelist? Is it the Jedi or is it the Sith? Do you believe that Luke's opinion was flawed, or do you believe he was right on the credits? Let us know your comments down below, and let's begin a dialogue. As always, my friends, may the Force be with you, and have a great day.
Just let me fall to my